Okay guys, we are still very much deep inside of the new Age of Darkness Saturnine content, and in today's video what I want to do is give you a quick run through of the rules, the very basic rules, the awesome set of rules that came attached to the instruction booklet that you get inside the Saturnine box set. I think these rules should 100% be a free downloadable PDF for everybody to read through and give themselves a kind of beginner's idea of how the rules for this game system work, and then you can add in all the nuances later on down the road. I think these are incredible, and I'm going to go through them step by step in today's video and give you guys an idea of how the game works. So by the end of this, you will hopefully have alleviated some of your fears about diving into this awesome game system and get yourself started with your first Legion. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, so this is the booklet in question. It is the introductory rules plus the miniature construction guide. So if we jump 12 pages in, the rules end, and then this is the assembly guide. So this is how you build your miniatures for the Saturnine box set. But the 13 pages that make up the beginning of this book actually show you step by step how to play a basic game of the Horus Heresy, which I think is an incredible thing. Because the only other thing that you get apart from this is, of course, the gigantic rule book. That is hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's got lore and pictures and art and everything, but quite a hefty amount of it is set aside for the rules, which can, of course, daunt new players or returning players to this edition. So I think the inclusion of this booklet in this box set is a stroke of absolute genius that I don't think enough people are shining a light on. So that's what I'm going to do in today's video. So we open it on the very beginning page, and it starts with the concept of preparing to enter the Age of Darkness and how a battle works. I honestly don't believe a lot of people's first idea of a Games Workshop game will be the Horus Heresy. Therefore, I feel these ideas are broadly understood by the player base. You know that you need two forces of roughly equal size, points wise or whatever. You know you need a battlefield, you know you need dice and measuring sticks. You know how to set up a mission, i.e. with deployment zones, where the good guys start, where the bad guys start, and stuff like that. And then the concept of how to win the battle, which is dictated here. It says that it's when both players have had 4 turns, the game ends. The winner is the person who has destroyed more models than their opponent. This is the very basic concept of a game. And that's all you really need to know from these 2 pages. Very, very simple. Okay, when we move over to the next page, it is the very simple movement phase. And this box set in here actually indicates all of the rules that you need to know on how to move your miniatures in a game. It's very simple. It's based around the concept that every single unit in the game has a movement value on their stat line. So this is a set of stat lines for Saturnine Terminators, the Praetor, Centurion, Veteran, or the Legionary. So if we focus in here on the Legionary stat line, you can see that he has a movement value of 7. That 7 represents the number of inches that this miniature can move in a game. So if we go back to the movement phase, it simply indicates how far a model can move in inches using a measuring device. So if we carry that across to the actual battlefield, we will have a squad of 10 Sons of Horus here. And we know that these miniatures can move 7 inches. So we can literally just open up our measuring tape to 7 inches, and we can measure from each individual miniature up to 7 inches of movement, which is what these guys can move, and get them into whatever position that they deem fit, whether they're looking to open fire or whether they're looking to get into a better position for charges. In addition to this, they can make a rush. Now, if you played 40k, this is the equivalent of running, but unlike 40k, it's not a random dice roll. So in 40k, you simply just roll a d6, add that number to your movement value, and you can move your soldiers up to that distance. That is not the case in this. In this one, you actually add your movement and initiative together. That means if we're looking at our Legionary again, with his movement of 7 and his initiative 4, adding those together means he can make a rush move of 11 inches. But that foregoes the ability to open fire or shoot in the shooting phase and to charge in the assault phase. It is simply a way to move your miniatures a further distance for capturing key points and objectives, or if there is nothing to shoot at or nothing to fight at, maybe you just want to reposition to be more useful next turn. Now, one additional rule I want to talk about right now is the ability to react, so making reactions. So when it is not your turn, so it's your opponent's turn, it gives you an opportunity to react to some of the things that he does in the turn. So you are allowed to make one reaction per turn, and you can make that one reaction in either the movement phase, which we'll talk about now, or the shooting phase, and we'll talk about that when we get to the shooting phase. So for the concept of the movement phase, the reaction you are allowed to do is to reposition. So all this information here isn't really all that important. It's the process bit at the end, which will of course account for the majority of the rules. So how it works is the player you're playing against has to finish moving their unit. Simple as that. Then the reactive player, so the person whose turn it is not, may move the reacting unit a distance equal to or less than its initiative characteristic in any direction. So we know that a unit of Marines is initiative 4. That allows those guys to move 4 inches in any direction. So to put this into perspective as what kind of use this would have in an actual game, let's imagine that these guys moved up to, say, here. That was their finish movement, and they were getting ready to kind of open fire. They're going to be within rapid fire range of these Imperial Fists. The Imperial Fists are going to make a reaction move, which lets them move 4 inches. So these guys can back up, getting themselves into a better position or into cover or just further away from the enemy, which will create a distance of more than 12 inches between the units, which means that these guys' firepower is now cut in half as they are not within rapid fire range of the other models. Okay, we now have a basic grasp of how the movement phase works. It's time to move on to the shooting phase. The shooting phase is in itself quite easy to learn as well. There's just certain things when you move through the rules that might get a little bit more complicated, some more crazy esoteric weaponry, but they will all have special rules and you can obviously look those up in the rulebook and figure out how they work. So we're only going to work with the basic bolter at this point, the most common weapon fired in anger in the Horus Heresy, and that should make it a little bit easier for working through this process. So the bit about how to shoot, it's very simple. There's only a couple of steps. There is check range to make sure that your guns are in range of your opponent. You then roll to hit, then you roll to wound. Your opponent takes armor saves and removes casualties, and that's the end. So going through those processes, all you need to do is firstly check range. So how do you know the range of your gun? So every gun in the Horus Heresy will have a stat line that looks something like this. Usually they'll have a couple of extra taglines after it for some of the special rules, but we're not going to be worried about that in this particular rulebook. So the standard bolt gun has a range of 24, and that represents inches. So that means that we can check our range with our measuring tape and know that a bolt gun can fire quite a long way. So I'm sure it will be in range. The only other caveats to kind of range and stuff like that is to make sure that you have line of sight to the enemy unit. So you must be able to physically draw a line from your model to that model that's uninterrupted in order to be within line of sight. Remembering that other units are you can shoot through them. So if you're an Imperial Fist unit, you have another Imperial Fist unit behind them, that you can shoot through those guys. They basically radio each other, say, hey, get down, or watch your heads, or go to the left so I can open fire, stuff like that. They've got all sorts of crazy kind of battlefield techniques for being able to do that, which means you can fire through them. The only caveat to that is if they are engaged in close combat. So if you have a huge melee kind of rolling around in front of you, 2 units are smashing each other to pieces, friendly units cannot shoot through the melee because they can't call their friends, say, hey, duck, or he will need to step aside to the minute. They're too busy fighting for their life against the enemy. Therefore, you cannot see through that entire blob of a combat, so you will not be able to shoot. So next, we need to figure out how many shots our squad is firing. So the representation that we have on the battlefield to my left or to my right is 10 tactical Marines aside, 10 legionary squads aside. So 10 guys all carrying bolters. So bolters have FP, and if you check FP, it means firepower. That represents the number of dice that you're going to roll in a fight. That's FP2, so that means it's going to be 20 shots. So from there, we're going to go to our roll to hit table and figure out what on those 20 dice do we need to roll in order to make a hit. And it's very simple. So once again, if we turn to our legionary profile, we can see the ballistic skill, which is the BS on the table, is a 4. And if we check on the ballistic skill table or the ranged hit test table, a ballistic skill of 4 means that we will hit on a 3+. So that means we will roll 20 dice, and on 3s, we hit our mark. Okay, so it's very simple. You have 20 dice, you give them a good shake, and you roll them. Any 1s and 2s are misses. Anything that is 3 or higher is a hit. The polite way to remove dice is to always remove your misses. So I'm going to remove the 1s and 2s from this sea of dice. and then you leave your hits behind. The reason that's the polite thing to do is if you just start willy-nilly grabbing the dice that have been successes, your opponent can't really know whether you're grabbing the correct number of dice or if you're picking up 1s and 2s as well and trying to slide the system a little bit. Unfortunately, some gamers out there have kind of besmirched the name of a lot of other gamers out there. So to save yourself any of that kind of issues, just remember that rule. You always remove the fails. You leave the hits in plain sight for your opponent to see, and then you can gather up and count those. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 hits on 20 dice. Hitting on a 3+ is not very good, but it's not too bad either. 11 hits. Okay, now we need to figure out if we have hurt our opponent. So those 11 dice that we have fired from our bolt guns, which has hit the opponent, are they going to cause any significant damage? We're going to use this wound chart here, which represents the strength of the thing trying to hurt the opponent versus the toughness of the opponent. Now, the reason I said the strength of the thing that's trying to hurt them, because you use this table twice in a turn. You use it in the shooting phase and you use it in the close combat phase, but you use different things with each one. So as an example, in the shooting phase, if I had a handgun and I was firing a handgun at something, it's the handgun that's going to do the damage. So it's the strength of that. It doesn't matter how strong that I am physically, the handgun will do all the work for me. Therefore, it's that strength you're worried about. Whereas if it was in close combat and I was wielding a baseball bat, the strength of me as a physical person will directly affect how strong I will hit the opponent. So therefore, your strength will take into effect for that. Hopefully that wasn't too complicated and you guys understood. So if we jump back to the legionary stat line, we see that he is a toughness of 4, and we learn that a bolter is a strength of 4. Which is the range strength 4. So when we return to this table, the strength is 4 and the toughness is 4, which means we are going to require a 4+ on the dice to cause any damage. So that means when we come back across to our actual battlefield with the guys fighting, the 11 dice that we hit with previously, we are going to roll again, and we are looking for 1s, 2s, and 3s to go away. Anything higher is an actual wound, which means that the bolt gun has found its mark and has wounded the enemy. And I've managed to wound 7 times. Now, this doesn't automatically mean that a Space Marine is dead or any kind of model is dead, because there are armor saves. These guys are head to toe in powered armor, some of the best protection the galaxy has to offer. Therefore, they can shrug off quite a lot of munitions that come flinging their way. So we're going to see if this saves them. How do we check this? If we go back to the legionary stat line, the last statistic is SV. Well, invulnerable is if they have one, but they don't. So SV is save, and it is a 3+. So what that means is those 7 dice that caused wounds and damage to the Space Marine, we get to roll those, and any 1s and 2s is bad news and is a dead Space Marine, but any 3, 4s, 5s, and 6s, one of them is left alive. So we have managed to unfortunately roll 3 1s and 2s and 4 successes. So that means that 3 Space Marines, which would be 1, 2, and 3, have been destroyed and would be removed from the battlefield. Okay, so the only other thing that I want to talk to you guys about in the shooting phase is the extra reaction that is possible to make. We showed you the reposition reaction, which we can do in the movement phase. Well, there's actually a return fire reaction as well. So how the reaction works for returning fire is, first of all, the player whose turn it is will open fire. So these 10 Sons of Horus will open fire on the Imperial Fist soldiers. And like we saw previously, they would have wounded and killed 3 models if we go by the rolls that we previously used. Now, normally those miniatures would not get to do anything because they have been killed. But if they had used the reaction to return fire, the process gets interrupted a little bit. So they would roll to hit, roll to wound. These guys would take armor saves, but they wouldn't remove their casualties just yet. Instead, they would get a round of return fire. So they would fire their own shots. And let's actually quickly roll it out. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So we've got 20 dice in my hand. I'm gonna roll those a little bit here. And just like I recently talked about with Space Marines, 1s and 2s is misses, and the rest are hits. So far we scored 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 hits. And we looked on that chart, strength versus toughness means 4, so I'm gonna roll that again. Imperial Fist had quite a good roll for wounding, 2, 4, 6, 8 wounds. And then the Sons of Horus would roll their armor save of 3+ like we talked about. And unfortunately, rolled 6 1s. So that's pretty funny. I like that. Imperial Fist doing the God's work as always. So that means that 3 guys would have died on this side and 6 guys on this side. And all the casualties are removed together at the end. So now that both squads have fired fully, you would then remove your 3 Imperial Fists and you would remove your 4, 5, 6 Sons of Horus. So that was quite a powerful and tactically useful thing for the Imperial Fist player to do. He's now negated the possibility of the Sons of Horus perhaps wishing to charge, because now it's 4v7 in a close combat fight. It's not very good. So yeah, so that reaction can be super useful, so keep that in mind. Okay, we've done moving and we have done shooting. Before we get on to the slightly more complicated step, which is assaulting and how the fighting phase works, I just want to take this quick opportunity to thank all of you guys for the continued support here on the channel, whether it be on Patreon, channel membership, liking videos, watching, commenting, subscribing, all of those good things. And I ask you once again to please keep that up. So if you are enjoying this video, like, comment and subscribe. If you're thinking about helping support the channel even further, things like Patreon, channel membership are all down below. Access to private Discord server with that, and you get an extra video every single week just for you guys, or just some of the awesome benefits of being involved. And if you're thinking about picking up Saturnine and any of the new Horus Heresy stuff yourself, and you're looking to save yourself some money, there's some links down below: Underworld Gaming here in Ireland, Element Games in the United Kingdom, or My Hobby Place for the rest of Europe. All will give you great discounts on Games Workshop pricing for these products, and we'll ship them directly to your front door. So it's a win-win. If you do order from any of those places, the channel will also get a nice little kickback, and you'll be helping us out. So that spiel is out of the way. Let's dive into the assault phase. Okay, it's time to move on to the third and final phase of a turn, which is close combat. So this page, honestly, page 9 of this booklet is fairly convoluted. They've written this in, I feel, a rather confusing way. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just covering all their bases, making sure there's no loopholes in the rules or whatever. But I had to digest this page for a little while. I had to go talk to my friends about it, my gaming group, and they had to explain everything, how it works, so I could basically tell you guys the correct way to do things. So and this isn't even the combat. This is just getting to the combat, the making the charge. So it's broken down into kind of a couple of different phases, just the charging part. First of all, you need to make sure of what you're charging and who you're charging with. So in the example that we have here, we're going to be charging with our Sons of Horus squad is going to want to assault the Imperial Fist player. So in order to be able to do this, they must not have rushed this turn, and they must not be locked in combat already. If those 2 criteria are met, that means that these guys can attempt to make a charge. The first thing that they do is make up a set-up move, is what it's called. I don't know why it's called that. It seems rather confusing to me. But it basically means the soldiers in this are going to move into a slightly better position, start drawing blades, kind of reforming themselves into whatever formation they want to make in order to assault. That's the way it works in my head. So that's how it works. So how a setup move works is you add your movement and initiative together. So for the Space Marines, like we looked at earlier, for their rush move, their movement is 7 and their initiative is 4, which means they get a score of 11. So if we go back to the piece of paper, we can see that if you have a score of 10 or 11, you get a 3-inch move. So that's your setup move, is 3 inches. So that allows the Sons of Horus miniatures to move up 3 inches. This represents them getting ready for a charge. What happens now is, if you have assault weaponry, you can now shoot at each other. So if you have pistols, or if you have SMGs, or you have lighter firepower, you are now allowed to both shoot these guys and open fire and try and thin down the ranks. Unfortunately, bolt guns are not assault weapons, therefore none of them get to shoot. But if you were, say, a Devastator squad or an assault squad, for instance, you would be able to drop down with your kind of big jump packs, you would move into range, you would fire off a hail of pistol rounds, and then you could move into close combat and start swinging your chainsword and causing some maximum damage. So for things that are geared around assaulting, it's quite a useful thing. All the new disintegrator guns are assault, so God only knows what's going to happen when those things try and charge. So once you have resolved your shooting, you can then roll 2 dice for the charging unit, pick the highest. So on this one, I managed to roll a 6, which means they will get a 6-inch charge move, which will bring them into contact with the Imperial Fists, ready to begin a round of close combat. The Imperial Fist player can then move in their initiative value, which is 4, to try and get as many of his soldiers into combat as possible with the enemy. Remember, you don't have to be in base contact, just within kind of range of it. So that means we will have a full fight of 10 Space Marines on 10 Space Marines. Okay, so now this phase, which is actually the close combat phase, is fairly similar to the shooting phase. You're going to roll to hit, you're going to roll to wound, people are going to take armor saves, and you're going to remove casualties. The only difference is because you are both kind of locked in close combat, you will both get to do all of this, which means we have to determine who fights first. And that is based on your initiative value. Just like if you ever played a role-play game out there and a combat starts, your DM will tell you to roll for initiative. That just determines the fight order. Unlike D&D, you don't roll for this. It is a stat line on your profile. So if we once again jump to the Legionary profile, we see I, which is your initiative, which is 4, which means they will be in step order 4 for fighting. Now, because everyone inside of this combat is the same initiative, which is 4, they'll all fight at exactly the same time. The next thing that we need to work out is how many attacks we have on our profile. So how devastating are we going to be in combat? So that refers to the A, which is attack. If you're ever curious as to what all of these stat lines mean, I know I'm just rattling them off, but the Weapons of the Age of Darkness, the profiles here gives you exactly what all of them are and what they mean in this little bit here. So once again, if we go to the AM, that's your attack modifier, sorry. A is attacks, which I for some reason can't see on this page now, I don't know why. But A is attacks. So that represents the number of dice you will roll in close combat. So there being 1 per legionary means that each of these squad will roll 10 dice. Now, unlike the handgun we talked about earlier, which is it's everything to do with the person holding it. How skilled am I with a firearm will be the sole determinant factor as to whether or not I hit you as the opponent. Whereas in close combat, your martial skill is directly paired with your opponent's martial skill to see who's going to win that fight. Therefore, we must go to our weapon skill, which is what we use for determining a fight. So we compare these. Once again, because we are both legionaries, we are both going to be 4, it is going to be fairly even, so that when we run over to our melee hit table, we are strength of 4, or sorry, weapon skill 4 versus weapon skill 4 means we will be 4 plus 2 hit with those dice. After that is exactly the same wound table we talked about earlier, but as opposed to being the strength of the gun, it's the strength of the fighter. And once again, because we are both legionnaires, it is 4, which means our hits will be 4 and 4. So is there any way of changing that? Well, actually, yes, there is. They're called chain bayonets, and it's what all the Marines have fixed to the end of their bolt guns. It will give you a +1 strength modifier. It means that the soldiers will become +1 strength, which will of course change the result we need to roll on this table, because the strength of the attacker will be 5, the defender's toughness will be 4, so suddenly it's a 3+ to wound. There's no AP, there's nothing that's going to detract from their armor, which means the Space Marines will then have to roll a 3+ armor save to stay alive. So let's work that through in practice. Okay, so my Sons of Horus soldiers I will roll for first, although technically they're going to be all striking at the same time. So, like we worked on, weapon skill v weapon skill, it's going to be 4s to hit. So I'm going to remove the 1s, 2s, and 3s from that. Then these 5 are successes. Because of the chain bayonets giving me +1 strength, making me strength 5, against the Space Marines toughness of 4, I'm going to be slightly better off, so it's going to be 3s for me to wound. I failed 2. And successfully do damage to 3 Imperial Fist Space Marines, who will now take their power armored save of 3 up. They pass all of them. Glorious. The Emperor, of course, protects. Now, the Imperial Fist will strike back. Exactly the same number of miniatures, exactly the same profile miniatures, fighting against Sons of Horus. So, once again, we are going to require 4s to hit. Now, unfortunately, I spoke a little bit too early, and we have 8 misses on those dice. We need 3s to wound. We do manage to wound with both of our Imperial Fist dice that do hit. So will the Sons of Horus fail any of his 3-up armor saves? The answer is no. So no damage was caused, no casualties will be removed. That combat will remain as a stalemate and will continue on next turn. Maybe the squads will call in a little bit of support, a Sons of Horus Praetor, or maybe a unit of the new Centurion or Saturnine Terminators will come in, help bolster it, and turn the tide of that fight. And that is literally the end of the assault phase and the end of how this game system actually works. There is, of course, going to be a lot more crazy rules out there in this system. Whether you have crazy big Kratos tanks, dreadnoughts, Primarchs, Flyers, or even Titans, they're all going to be stalking the battlefields of the Horus Heresy game system, and these are all going to have additional rules that you will of course have to learn and figure out as you go. But as a basic game system, I do not think that you can go wrong with playing a couple of games with the introductory rule set that comes in the Saturnine box set to get your kind of your grips with the rules and then go from there. Hopefully you guys found this useful, and you will of course think about diving into the glorious game, which is the Horus Heresy, and learning a little bit more about it. Hopefully this video made sense, you learned something, and you're looking forward to more videos like this in the near future. If you do want me to go into more detailed rules, please do let me know in the comments below. Other than that, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you across the battlefield.